in the number of people that are joining us. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time on this Wednesday to join us. My name is Becca. I lead the US Solutions Consultants team. I've been with PriceLabs for almost 3 years now. Before joining PriceLabs, I was a PriceLabs user. So I was definitely in your shoes at one point, trying to figure out how to make my PriceLabs account work best for me. So today, this is actually a new series of sort of webinars that we're trying out. So you all are kind of like our guinea pigs a little bit. So hopefully, do give us feedback if there are questions that you hoped you hoped that we had answered and we didn't get to it, or if there's anything that we can do better next time. It's extremely valuable to us. We will be launching a poll. I think, Pallav, if you want to launch it, or I can try to. I can try to, if I remember how to do it. Yes, I do. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch this. So just want to gauge how you all are feeling about your current PriceLabs setup. So just a little bit of background. You all were invited to this session because you've been with PriceLabs for between 1 and 3 months. And some of the feedback that we get when we go to conferences or talk to users is a lot of people come to us and they say, wow, Becca, PriceLabs is awesome. We love it. But I wish that I knew how to use it better. I wish that I was getting more out of it. There's sort of like this feeling like you're not doing enough. So hopefully we're able to, in this session, kind of get that feeling, hopefully move you all on the needle. Looks like a lot of you are putting on a scale out of 1 to 10, a lot of you are putting 5, some of you below, some of you higher. I see a couple, I see 110, and you are a PriceLabs Pro, which is awesome. But hopefully we'll be able to move this needle a little bit during this webinar. And again, this is being recorded. So if you want to watch this again at some point, we will probably put this on our YouTube channel. We do have another session. It'll be the same session next week at the same time. So if you want to join and hang out with us next week too, you're more than welcome to. But awesome. So let's dive on in. So again, today we're kind of just going over some of the basics, but a lot of the times the basics are somewhat all you need, right? I think a lot of people think of PriceLabs and they say, oh, I really need these complex strategies and I need to be in there all the time and doing and changing. And a lot of the times when we do account reviews, we end up having to peel back some of the customizations that people feel like they needed, and actually sort of reteach them the basics. And hopefully we can do the same today. So today we're going to go over your base price and your minimum price setup, because fine tuning your base price and your minimum price can make all the difference. I saw a couple people in the questions that were asked before, like when you were registering, some of you said my prices are too high compared to my competitors and things like that. A lot of the times a base price adjustment can actually make a huge difference in your total pricing strategy. So we'll start with there. Then we'll go on to minimum stay restrictions. If you are not currently using our minimum stay restrictions, you definitely should be. And we're going to go over sort of how to set them up in your account. Of course, do join our 101 webinar. If you haven't, that will go over the minimum stay basics. But if you want to set up things like your seasonal minimums, because that's what our minimum stay recommendation engine is telling you to do, we'll go over how to do that and sort of some things to keep in mind. Next, we'll go into actually comparing your listings with the market. So there was a lot of questions around how to actually do that, how to know where you're sitting against the market, how to price against your competition. And there's this really great article. I'll try to find it in a second and share it in the chat. It's actually called, I think, Pricing Against Your Competitors or something like that. It's in our knowledge base. I'll kind of go through the basics of that, but we'll also send that out as well. And then finally, we'll talk about a couple of customizations as just like a little bit of a bonus. Again, we don't want to over customize, right? If you're making changes to the PriceLabs like algorithm, essentially, you're then almost like the custodian to those customizations that you make. So in the long run, you might be making more work for yourselves versus just, running off of the normal algorithm. Of course, customizations are there because the human touch is so important when dealing with any AI, like a dynamic pricing tool. So we'll go through some that you should and shouldn't use. Also, our advanced onboarding webinar that runs Thursdays at this time is also a really great resource if you are unsure of which customizations to use. So we'll sort of go over high level stuff and of course answer any questions that you all have. So beautiful. We'll do this quickly. PriceLabs 101. So we do offer what we consider our 101 webinar. It's called PriceLabs Basic Onboarding. This teaches you how to set up your minimum price, your base price, set up your dynamic minimum stay settings. Make sure that you understand what all of our default customizations are and sort of why and how they work, and generally other sort of basic questions. So if you are unsure about any of these questions that we've put here, and you haven't joined that basic webinar, it's probably a really good place to start. And I should have had this pulled up, but to register for that webinar, if you go to our website and you go to resources, there's a ton of great stuff here, but especially our training. And our basic webinar is right here. It's in all different languages. It happens in English every single day, and you can just register here. So I'll go ahead and drop this in the chat. So everybody, if you haven't joined this webinar and you aren't sure about those questions, go ahead and register because it's a really, really great resource. And it's usually small groups, so you can have any of your questions answered. So beautiful. So let's talk about our base price. So what is the base price in PriceLabs? Base price is essentially the foundation of all of your pricing. So if it's set too high or too low, it can backfire. It can cause you to either sell your property for too low or make your prices too high, and then you won't get any bookings, which really isn't ideal. So let's dive in and kind of talk about our base price help tool and just talk about, understanding where your base price is. So I'm just going to hop into my demo account and it's got some crazy settings. So do keep that in mind. If you see anything kind of funky, that is why. I think this one is pretty good though. Okay. Beautiful. So when I'm choosing my base price, the base price help tool is really great. When you first import your listings, you will see like an imported base price show up here. Once you've been syncing for more than 2 weeks, that'll change to a recommended price because our base price help tool actually is recalculating what we think your base price should be based on your current performance. So you will see a new recommended base price here. And of course, if you're syncing for a while, you might even see, I don't think that I have any on here. No. So on this main page, if you see kind of like a little yellow dot with a, icon next to your base price, that means that we actually have a new recommendation for you. You shouldn't be changing your base price too often. I would say change it more often when you first get started. So like right now where you all are in that like 1 to 3 month range, you still want to be fine tuning your account. So it's okay to change your base price a little bit, but I would never change it really drastically. Like I wouldn't go from like 400 to 100. Make small incremental changes, see how it works for maybe 2 weeks, see how your bookings perform. And then if you're not seeing the results that you want, maybe drop it another 10% or raise it another 10%. So when we're first using our base price, couple of things to keep in mind here. Number one, your location. So this listing here is in Nags Head. This is North Carolina. This is kind of in the Outer Banks area. Now, I might not want to, if I zoom in, you can kind of see there's like a cluster of listings right here. There's another cluster up here, and then I even have some on this other island. Now, the first thing I can do is use my little lasso select tool to make sure that I'm looking at just the listings in really my closest area. Now, some of you might be in more rural areas. You want to be careful doing this because you don't want to maybe like drop it down to just have like one or two listings. Really, you should have at least, I would say at least 20 listings in this circle that you make. Now, you don't all necessarily need to use this circle or lasso tool either. Um, but in markets like this, where clearly, if I've actually never been to Nag's Head, but I would assume that if I wanted to stay on Nag's Head versus stay on Manteo, the performance in the market in these two areas, even though like by the way the crow flies, they're very close to each other, the performance is probably different. So that's why I would use this lasso tool. Now that's actually not going to change your recommended price at all. That's going to adjust this market based. So make sure that you have that selected when you're playing with this. Now your page will have a save area button that mine does not, just because of my demo account. So be sure to click that like save button, and then you'll actually see this market-based price change. Now, I also choose a segment. So my next thing I would say is, okay, let me think about how my listing compares to the other listings in my market. Now, you might think, hey, I have a mid-scale rental, but think about all these other listings that are around you. Is your listing mid-scale compared to your competition? So mid-scale will actually put your market-based price at the 50th percentile of all of the basically average prices of these listings. So if you hover over any of these dots, you'll see average price 290, average price 273. And essentially what this is telling you is if this listing was on PriceLabs, an average price is very similar to a base price. So do keep that in mind. So is my listing similar to all these listings around here? What are things that make it stand out? Again, this is that human aspect that is very important, again, when dealing with AI. PriceLabs does not know that you just redid your kitchen last year and you just had professional photos taken. PriceLabs doesn't know if you really need to redo your kitchen and all the other listings around you have nice new kitchens. So you can use this page to do a little bit of research. Click on some of these listings. How does my listing compare to this one or this one? And this can give you a good idea of maybe where you sit. Is mine significantly nicer than all the listings that I'm seeing? Is it a little bit long in the tooth compared to other ones? Or am I sort of right in the middle? Am I like an average compared to these? You can also change this bedroom selection as well. So like right now, if I look at just 5 bedrooms, you're going to see how this price changes as I select the different amounts. Now, the reason we do this is like, and this isn't like a great example, but maybe you have a really large home and there's only like 6 other large homes in the area. You might want to actually get a little bit more data from similar-ish size listings. So maybe I'd want to see 4 and 6 bedrooms along with 5 bedrooms if there just aren't many in my market. I might also have a 5-bedroom that is like really, really small. Like I turned a closet basically into a bedroom and I'm calling it a bedroom. I might want to actually compete more with the 4 bedrooms than all of the 5 and 6 bedrooms. So I have to select those as well. Either way, pay attention to this market-based price, and then you can always double check down here and say, okay, well, how are my prices going to change throughout the year? This is basically showing you your average price per month. Of course, we will go lower for low demand dates and higher for high demand dates, but on average, this should give you kind of an idea of how things change as you change that base price. Like in my high season, usually most people know what their listing should rent for in their high season. Does it make sense for me to rent this listing for $834 a night in July? Is that much too high? If so, maybe I should make some slight adjustment and bring it down to, something a little bit more reasonable. But we'll get into actually using the market data to make sure that my prices are where they're supposed to be in a second. Now, I have been talking for quite some time and I'm seeing a lot of questions come in, which is awesome. Let me take a second and actually look at some of these so I I can answer some of them. And I do see at least one question in the chat. If you could please put them in the Q&A, that way I'm able to keep track of them better. I don't, Flav is here, but I don't have other helpers today, so it's kind of hard for me to juggle the multiple screens. Okay, so Michael, I see your question. We're going to pause that. We're going to look at that when we talk a little bit about market data. Anonymous attendee, Max Day, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, Wai Sang, you have a property in Fort Worth, Texas, and another in Arlington. You don't know when high season is or what events are coming. I'll talk a little bit about that when we're talking about data. But if you want to know when your high season is, the Space Price Help tool can help. You'll be able to see exactly sort of when your peak season is right here. There's other ways to do it, but this is a very quick and easy view. But I'll touch on that when we talk about data as well. So I'll answer that one. Does the recommended price consider extra? Like 2 listings have hot tubs and the majority of listings around me do not. Josh, this is a really good question, and it's a perfect example of how you'd want to maybe adjust your base price compared to the listings around you. So again, you know that your listing has an amenity that some of the other listings do not. That would maybe put you in a little bit higher of a segment. And if this segment change is too much, see 436 to 555, that might be a little bit too wide of a range. Maybe you don't want to try to go that high yet. You can always input a manual price and maybe say, let's try 500 instead of, 450 or 550. And that might bring you up just a little bit. So you are a little bit more competitive, but you're also getting like rewarded for that extra value that your listing has. Yes, Chip, if you don't use this lasso tool, all of the listings, all these little dots, oopsies, that's not what I want to do. All of the little dots, here, there we go. All of the little dots on your map here are actually going to be counted when you are choosing this market-based segment. You'll notice, I think that if I get rid of the 4 and the 5, you'll notice that the number of listings on the map actually reduce because only the 5 bedrooms are the ones that are being taken into account in this case. Spencer, I'm not getting the ability now to change the quality of listing. It should be there. If it's hidden, you might see like this view where you can't change it. Click on the little arrow and you should be able to change it then. This little arrow on the right-hand side. Hopefully that helps. If you're still not seeing it, reach out to our support and we'd be happy to look into that for you. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about data later. Yeah, so again, I mean, you can use the lasso. It's a little bit hard because Airbnb actually doesn't send the exact address for every listing. So that's why, it's just a little bit hard because even if I circle all these ones that look like they're beachfront, they might not actually be beachfront just because of how Airbnb sort of, chooses the location for their listings. Again, you could, once you kind of have that little circle around the ones you want, you could also kind of just hover over them or click, is this one beachfront? What's the average price? And then use sort of those average prices to kind of inform what your base price would be. Our listing, oopsies. I thought I may have just answered a question that I shouldn't have. If I don't get to your questions, feel free to upvote your question. Okay, can PriceLabs help me survey amenities at competing properties in one dashboard without having to data mine myself? Rafi, I'm not quite sure what you mean by data mining, but if you haven't checked out our market dashboard, so under this market research section, there's 2 tools. There's market dashboards and revenue estimates. Market dashboards does have a pretty in-depth section that talks about common amenities and desired amenities. And you can actually add different amenities that you're maybe thinking about adding to your home to those lists to see how common or how desired they are. We do have a great webinar. Again, if you click on that training link that I sent y'all, we do have a great market dashboards webinar that happens the first week of every month. That will go through that as well. Now, okay, in the future, okay, what if the suggested base price is higher than my current price, but my actual bookings for the next 30 days are low? Shouldn't I keep my prices lower than the suggested base until my bookings pick up? Alex, incredible question. Great, great, great question. Yes. So any of the changes that I'm talking about today, and we just did a series, we have a YouTube playlist that talks about some changes and some strategies to do when your market is not performing as well as it has in the past. Any of the changes that I talk about today, whether it's our minimum stay, our minimum price, or our base price, if your listing is not performing well, I would not necessarily recommend raising your price or increasing your minimum stay. Like if you're not getting any bookings, I wouldn't raise your prices. Ideally things will pick up, and of course there are things outside of your prices that are influencing your performance, right? I've talked to people where their prices are rock bottom and very much under the market, and their listings are still not booking. And in that case, it tends to be more of like an SEO problem where maybe they need to switch up the photos a little bit, refresh that description, maybe even restart the listing if you have an ability. But sometimes pricing isn't always the only tool in your toolbox. It's what we do. It's what I'm able to sort of talk to as as a representative of PriceLabs. But throughout this, keep in mind there are all these other things that you want to be paying attention to if your listing is underperforming. But yes, I would not recommend raising your prices if you are not getting any bookings, but there are other things that you potentially should be looking into as well. Hopefully that makes sense. Beautiful. So I think that we're pretty good on base price. Of course, if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We have plenty of time at the end. Well, hopefully we'll have plenty of time at the end to cover them. So let's talk a little bit about minimum price setup. So we typically recommend, if you join that basic onboarding webinar, we typically recommend having your minimum price be at least 20% below your base price. Now, the reason why we recommend this is because part of PriceLabs is not just maximizing revenue during those high demand times, but it's also maximizing your occupancy during low demand times. Now, when demand is low, you don't want to be priced really high in the market. You want to be much more competitive. So dropping your minimum price actually can help you pick up more occupancy during those low demand periods instead of just sticking at that minimum. Now, PriceLabs does not give you like a market-based minimum recommendation because your minimum price is a little bit funny, right? As vacation rental owners, operators, we're not like a regular business. We're not a hotel where it doesn't matter, anybody can stay in our rooms and, throw a party and that's fine. A lot of these homes have owners that think of them as a second home. So your threshold for parties, for damage, is probably a little bit higher than that of a hotel. Do we have please make sure y'all are muted, if possible. So as I was saying, the minimum price allows you to kind of set that threshold, right? If you set a minimum, we will not go below it, so you won't be selling. Do keep in mind any discounts or promotions that you set outside of PriceLabs, we do not have control over. So keep that in mind when you're setting your minimum, right? So if we're pricing at $500 a night and you and your owner agree that that is the absolute minimum that they will take, then you do like a 20% discount on one of the channels and we're sending 500 out to that channel. The there is the potential for you to rent out for lower than your actual minimum. Because again, we do not control prices once they leave our system, once they sync with your connected channel or PMS. But a big mistake that we do see is having this minimum price too high, especially now as the markets are changing. A lot of markets are a little bit softer this year than they've been in the past. So we want to be able to come down when we need to come down. So a couple of things that we do to help you with that. Number one, just like we do a base price recommendation, if we notice that your minimum price, our prices are sitting at your minimum price for, I believe, the next 30 days for an extended period of time, we will actually recommend to drop your minimum price. So you will see those little notifications pop up that say, hey, you might be able to get more bookings if you drop this minimum by, 5, 10%. Something else that you can look at is these metrics. So metrics are really, really useful. We can get into that a little bit more when we're talking about data. But we do have a metric. If I click add metric and add metric, you can see minimum price hitting dates. I can add the next 30. And any of my listings that have, oh, there we go. It'll refresh once you add that. So any of my listings that are hitting at my minimum price, it looks like I actually don't have any. I probably should have set my account up a little bit better as oh, here we go. Here's one. So my next head Sandy Toes Getaway, 50% of the dates over the next 30 days are hitting my minimum. That could potentially indicate to me that my minimum is too high. So maybe I can come in here and there's a couple things that I can do. I can actually change my minimum price under configure prices. I can say, I can do a date specific override and just say, hey, April's, a little bit slower than I thought it was going to be. Instead of doing my minimum price of 300 for this month, again, I just selected the dates and this brings up the date specific override. You can change your minimum price here. So maybe for this month, I'm okay with 250 or 205 as my minimum instead of the 300. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this because date specific overrides means that you are doing manual changes and you might need to keep up with those. Ideally, we can fine tune the customizations to say, actually, let me be as hands off as possible. A lot of you had questions about how to, set it on autopilot. Now, it's not always completely possible, but through our customizations, hopefully you're going to be able to do less and less of these manual overrides. So how would I do this? If I'm actually okay with 205 last minute, but 300 is really kind of like the minimum that I have in mind. This is kind of our first little nugget for customizations that I think you all should maybe pay attention to. So if I go to my customizations, I'll click edit. And then you probably won't see this, but you can click on this more customizations. If you like having this menu open, you can pin it right here. And I'm going to go to seasonal and minimum prices. Now, I absolutely love this far out minimum price setting. Now, this is really, really great, especially if you kind of have like a higher minimum in mind that you would ideally like to keep at. But if you're like last minute dropping your minimum manually, it's just kind of a waste of your time, right? So we're going to automate that. So what I'm going to do is my actual minimum price in my mind is 205. That's the bottom. I won't go any lower than that. I am keeping in mind potentially those, those different promotions that I might set on the separate channels, but 205 is my minimum for PriceLabs. So I'll save that real quick. But really, I'm hoping that 300 is my minimum, especially if I'm booking, if I'm receiving a booking 30 days out, I don't want anything below 300. So I'm going to use my far out minimum to do that. So I've set my lowest minimum under configure prices. And then under seasonal and minimum prices, I'm going to turn on my minimum far out. And I'm just going to do fixed here just because I think that's the most simple. And I can say, actually, my minimum is 300 on both weekdays and weekends beyond 30 nights. So essentially this is creating kind of like a level, right? So anything beyond 30 nights, my minimum is going to be 300. Within 30 nights, my minimum is 205. So allowing a little bit more flexibility for those potentially last minute bookings, especially if my calendar is looking a little bit sparse bookings wise. Now, how do I even know if 205 is a good minimum, or is 305 still too high? We'll talk a little bit about that when we get into neighborhood data, but generally speaking, you can use this chart to kind of see where the bottom of the market is, and then use that to help you figure out what your minimum should be. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. Trying to think if there is anything else. Oh, something else that is interesting that you can do. If you're not sure like how low PriceLabs it would normally be recommending your prices without actually changing your minimum. So here, see my minimum is 300 again, and I have all these dates that are priced at 300. I can hover over any of these dates, and this brings up our handy little tooltip. So this should hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you have about why we're pricing a certain way. But you'll notice there's sort of a couple of sections. So there's first my base price, again, my foundation of my pricing, and then all of our factors and customizations are applying to that base price. So then we've got our market factors, and then we have our price customizations. So you'll notice the line that says not uncustomized. The line that says customized price says 264, but then we're hitting that threshold of 300, which is my minimum. So this tells me that PriceLabs would be pricing at 264 if I didn't have that 300 minimum. So then when I'm thinking of what should my actual minimum be, or if I'm going to actually take that route and do an override to change my minimum price, I can know that maybe 260, 250 would be a decent minimum for me to employ. Cool. I know we're running a little bit over time. Again, this is the first time I've run this webinar, so bear with me. I know we've got a lot of questions, so let me go back through. Michael, we'll get to you, we'll get to you, we'll get to you. Airbnb. Okay, sorry, I am going to, how can I use PriceLabs to show discounted rate on channels? So I will answer that in a second. We'll kind of save that for the end. Where do you set the far out minimum? So I will go through that one more time. So from your listing, you're going to click edit on your customizations. Probably won't see this more customizations open, so you'll have to click more customizations. Then you'll go to seasonal and minimum prices, and it's the fourth option down. Now we just discussed fixed as an option, but you do have two other options. So percent change on minimum price and percent change on base price. For this webinar, I would say just avoid percent change on base price. It's one of the most misused settings that I see. Fixed is a really great option. And change on minimum price is also a really great option. So essentially, if I put 100 under configure prices, and then I do say 20% here, that would make we're basically calculating off of this minimum and saying, okay, well, 30 days out, 100 times 1.2 or 20%, increase it by 20%. My new minimum for these dates is going to be 120. This is also a really great setting to use if you're using our seasonal minimum prices. So if you are in an area like me, Charleston, South Carolina, we're a very seasonal market, you can also vary your minimums by season. Now, again, think of these as just like the bottom that you wouldn't want to rent below. A lot of the times, again, even with seasonal minimums, I'm seeing people price their minimums too high. So just be careful when you're when you set up a seasonal profile. Okay. Perfect. Okay, okay. I see one question. Are you finding bookings down nationwide compared to previous years? It's a really hard question to answer. So PriceLabs uses a hyper local pulse algorithm, or it's called hyperlocal pulse, because every market is so different. Since the pandemic, things have been crazy. A lot of markets are seeing or have seen in the past, 4 years, a huge boom in supply. So a lot more supply is coming online. Now, how the actual demand in that market is reacting with that new supply is very, very localized. So, what's happening in Charleston versus what's happening in Dallas versus what's happening in Hawaii are very different things. So, it's hard for us to say that bookings are down nationwide compared to previous years. But I will say that some of the sort of leftovers from the pandemic seem to be toning down a little bit. So, like, April and May after the pandemic, sort of in many um, in many markets, what you'd consider like shoulder seasons, those were really, really strong right after the pandemic or even during the pandemic. Now we're starting to see them kind of become, again, a little bit more shouldery like we did pre-pandemic times. But again, very specific to where you are and even what type of listing, what segment you're in that market. Not the most specific answer, but hopefully that makes sense. Can I remove, Okay. When do we use minimum far out pricing? So again, minimum far out pricing is just sort of like a step down. So if you've set this minimum price under configure prices as 350, but in the back of your mind, you're saying, if it's last minute and I don't have anything on the books, I'm actually okay with 250. You would manually have to go in here and change, like I did right here, my minimum price, I just changed it to 250 for these next 4 days. Now, setting your minimum far out price would allow you to not have to manually come in and change that. You can still have that maybe higher minimum a little bit further out on your calendar, but then you can use the minimum far out, or sorry, the minimum under configure prices to be your actual bottom line. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, cool. So moving on. And this is when we're supposed to start our Q&A. Hopefully I'm answering a lot of the questions that y'all had as we're going. There are some that I will save for the end though. So if y'all want to stick around for a little bit, I promise, or I'll do my best to get to all of your questions. But next, let's move on to best practices for minimum stay restrictions. So these settings, as it says here, should be in line with our market recommendations. A lot of people say, hey, what should my minimum stay be? And again, it's very market specific, and it's also very specific to the size of the listing, right? A 1-bedroom home is going to see very different patterns than like a 7-bedroom home. So that's what our minimum stay recommendation engine does for you. Again, I forget, I think Alex pointed this out. If you're not getting any bookings and you have like a 1 or a 2-night minimum stay, I wouldn't necessarily recommend raising your minimum. I would maybe look at other things that could be affecting your performance, your low performance, before employing, maybe stricter restrictions. But if you have like a 1 or a 2-night minimum, you might actually be causing your bookings to become very fragmented. So I don't have any bookings on this calendar, but if I had a 1 or 2-night stay, I might have like a 1-night stay here on the 20th and then a 2-night stay here on the weekends. And what people don't realize is having one day booked, like having this 20th booked, makes it so much harder to book dates around that. So if I've got just the 20th booked, it's going to be much harder for me to book, like the 16th through the 19th. It's going to be much harder for me to book that Sunday night check-in at the 21st and, through the next week. So having your minimum stays not aligned with market demand can really, really affect your performance long term. You might be getting bookings, but you're not getting the bookings that you want. So to take a look at what our minimum stay recommendation is, you'll go here, just click edit, open up your customizations. You'll see stay restrictions. I'll turn it on and I'll click setting suggestions available. Now, I prefer short term, so most of my bookings are less than 14 nights. If you prefer bookings that are more than 14 nights, you would want to select prefer midterm. So I'll click go. So a little bit hard to read if you're not used to this UI, but let's sort of walk through it together. So my default minimum stay, so what would normally apply and work for this market would be a 2-night stay for weekdays and a 3-night stay for weekends. Then we have a bunch of exceptions to that rule below that I can either decide to accept or deny, or I can even edit it on the next page. So again, 2 nights for weekdays, 3 nights for weekends. We're going to make exceptions for gaps on the calendar. Now this is set up to fill gaps exactly. So if I have a 1-night gap, it'll be a 1-night minimum. If it's a 2-night gap, it'll be a 2-night minimum. We can be a little bit more flexible in the next step if you want. That's a little bit more advanced though. We're also dropping down from a 2 and a 3 down to 1 and 1 last minute. So within 6 nights, we're going to allow a 1-night stay. Again, we're not hotels. Sometimes having 1-night stays can, cause problems in the property. So you can always either deselect this or edit it on the next step. Now, the interesting one is this next one here, where we're going from a 2 and a 3 to a 4 and a 5 outside of 90 nights, and then a 5 and a 5 outside of 180 nights. Now, this is a really key step, right? Because you don't want that 1 or 2-night stay to get booked 6 months out and then block your calendar for potentially other longer stays. In this market, there is a demand for longer stays. And we're flexible as the dates get closer, as our opportunity to book decreases. We are dropping it down to 2 and 3 and then 1 later on. But why not, while there's the demand for it in the market, ask for a higher minimum stay? It can actually really increase your revenue in our models, I believe, by managing your minimum stay with data. I believe that we saw a 5 to 10% increase in revenue. So keep that in mind. Now you'll notice at the bottom here that we do have additional recommendations. Now they look a little bit funny, but essentially this is saying January, February, and December in this market are dead. Nobody is staying for 5 or 6 nights. You might not even be able to get a 2 or a 3-night stay. So be as flexible as possible. Now, how do we actually set these up? You're going to want to set up minimum stay profiles and then assign them seasonally. Now, we all don't have time for me to go through exactly how to do that. But what I would do is maybe take a screenshot of this or get sort of like a general. This is basically saying allow 1-night stays in my off season. Maybe I don't want to do that, but I'm going to still be a little bit more flexible. So I'll go to my dynamic pricing menu, go to your customizations page. You'll go to profiles and set up a minimum stay profile here, and then you can assign it seasonally. If you are unsure about the steps that I just gave you, you can always click in this help chat bubble and do maybe seasonal. We'll see if this pops up. That should be, we'll say minimum stay. Min stay profiles. Yeah, creating and using min stay profiles. Okay, that's the article I'm looking for. This will be, and I will drop this in the chat for any of you that might be interested in using minimum stay profiles. Again, we don't have time to go over it today, but I think that it is very useful if you do want to change your minimum stay throughout the year. Okay, so let's see what we've got questions wise. So I did see one question. How can I set up a max stay? Currently, PriceLabs does not push max stays, I believe, to any of our partners. You may be able to set up a max stay in your, connected account. Because we're not sending that data, we can't overwrite it. So that's something that you would set up in your in the account that we're connected to. Ooh, we are short on time. Just looking for minimum stay restrictions. So some of you might be using your PMS or property management system or channel manager and controlling your minimum stay there. That's totally fine. But a lot of the property management systems don't have the same abilities that we do to drop your minimum stay over time or to automatically detect those orphan gaps and then adjust your minimum stay based on that. So we recommend using PriceLabs, but if your PMS or connected account has the same abilities as us, then you're doing fine. You could even just use the minimum stay recommendation engine and then, import basically that data into your PMS or transpose it. So you can use your minimum stay in your PMS or channel manager too. We just think it's a little bit more simple to use just one tool for it. And then also, obviously, we're giving you data-backed recommendations as well. Sorry, I'm seeing a lot of questions that aren't related to minimum stay, but I will try to get to those later. Okay, Amen asked, what do you recommend for number of days and beyond for minimum price far out? Again, if you don't have, so this is going back to minimum stay, but I'll answer this because I may have missed that question before. If you don't have a number in mind that, hey, I'd like to get this minimum at least 30 days out, I personally I wouldn't use that setting. Again, we want to use the sort of the mantra of like less is more when it comes to PriceLabs. So if you don't actually have like a reason or a thought behind a setting that you're doing, I would evaluate whether you actually need it or not. PriceLabs does have our far out premium built in, so prices will be higher anyways further out on your calendar. The minimum prices, again, really just use it as like a safety. Like my owners would be upset with me if I rented for this low, even maybe in this case, if we're talking about minimum far out, if I rented for this low, this far out, my owners would be upset. Or I would not be able to pay my mortgage or something. Okay. How to edit created profiles and the seasonal settings. You would have to go to that customizations page to edit your profiles. It should have information on that in the article that I sent. Okay, customization recommended stay. Yeah, so my customizations recommended my minimum stay to be a lot higher than I'm used to. Are those recommendations based on the data for my area? Yes, so that recommendation engine is pulling again from that sort of same hyper local comp set. So we're looking at those 350 or so closest listings of similar size to you. So we're evaluating over the past year how far in advance bookings are being made and how long people are staying for. So essentially, there is like a nice chart in our market dashboards that helps you visualize this actually. But yeah, so it could be that your market is actually other listings in your market are getting longer minimum stay or sorry, my cat is bothering me now. It could be that other listings in your market are getting longer stays booked, but because you have a short minimum stay, those are the bookings that you're getting. So again, we're trying to filter the bookings and the demand that you have for your property into the most valuable potential bookings. Again, if you are sitting without any without any bookings right now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend making your customizations more strict. This is something where you can maximize your revenue if you're actually doing okay currently. If you don't have anything on the books, you kind of want to be in a little bit more of a not self-preservation mode, but in a different mode than the folks that are looking to level up and sort of maximize their revenue, even though they're doing pretty good already. Hopefully that helps. Ooh, and we only have 10 minutes and we still have so much to cover. I am going to have somebody else join me next time to help with all this Q&A. Cool. Beautiful. So let's hop on in. I think we already covered this. So great. So this is really a really important part because I sort of teased this a little bit when we were talking about base price and minimum price. So let's take a look at the market data that you can use to ensure that your pricing is the way that you want it to be. And also let's talk a little bit about how to price against your competition. And um, I'm going to drop this in the chat because I think this is a really, really great article. I'm going to try to summarize for you all. And I think this will help you a little bit when you're thinking about your pricing against your neighborhood. So I'm going to hop from my calendar into neighborhood data. And it's going to load. So what's great about this section is if you're on Hyperlocal Pulse, this is showing you all the data that's actually feeding into the algorithm. So of course we have our pricing chart here, which does affect the algorithm like a little bit, but what's really affecting the algorithm is this occupancy data because we're really trying to track demand, not price match you to the market. So you can add last year data and you can also add pickup. Now, essentially what we're seeing here, the red line is the current market occupancy. So on any given day, how booked up is the market? You can add last year data and it's going to add two more lines. So I'll hide the current market occupancy. You have the market occupancy last year today, which when overlaid with this year's market can give you some really cool insights. So you'll notice that some of these key weekends coming up, the red line is below the gray line, which is essentially telling me that the market is softer this year than it's been in years past. Last year, as of April 10th, this market was booked up at 54% for Friday, May 17th, whereas this year we're only at 42%. So our final occupancy might not be as high as it was last year. Again, we're seeing a little bit of softness in the shoulder season, like I was saying before. Now, we can also add the market final occupancy. Now, if everything goes as well as it did in the last year, if we're seeing that our occupancy, kind of like it is here in the summer, is like pacing at around the same, you can kind of think of this market occupancy last year final as like the potential that exists in the market. We might go higher, we might go lower, and hopefully some of this pacing can actually give you a little bit of insight there. But what PriceLabs does essentially when we're calculating your prices, we're looking at these three lines. We're looking at this data for every single day on your calendar and coming up with what we think the final market occupancy is. So we're making a prediction every single day and using that to inform things like our demand factor and the seasonality and rolling that all up into your price. Now to use, so the occupancy chart is really great to look at. The other thing, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this before we moved on, is this pickup. So I did see a couple people ask about how to see what's been booking in the market recently. This pickup line is really great. So you'll see two lines. I'm actually going to hide this last year data just because it's getting a little bit messy here. You'll see this little dotted line down at the bottom here. Now that is pickup. So if we're looking at this week or this date, for example, Friday, May 17th, currently it is booked at 42% occupancy. In the last 7 days, 2.8% occupancy has been booked. So if you were to look at this graph, like a week ago, you would see probably closer to like 40% occupancy, but we've grown 2.8% in the past week. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Now moving on to this future pricing chart. So right now we're going to show you 4 to 6 bedrooms. Again, that hyper local model is looking at similar size listings, but I can always refine this. Maybe I just want to look at the 4 bedrooms. I'm going to click on that pink square and do this, and then click apply. Now, one thing that the article that I dropped in the chat talks about is sort of where you want to price against your competition. And this chart is a really great way to help you understand where you're at compared to your competitors. So the sort of where the gray and the dark pink meet, that's the market's 50th percentile. So say I had 105 bedrooms in this market and I lined them up from, number 1 least expensive to 100 most expensive. Where the gray and the pink meet, that is number 50 in that line. That's how expensive they are. So that's sort of like the middle of the market. The bottom of the gray, that's the 25th percentile, and the bottom of the dark pink, or the top of the dark pink, that's the 75th percentile. Now, I personally, especially if you don't have like a luxury or really high-end listing, sometimes I'll just hide this market 75th to 90th percentile because it tells me when I might be overpriced. The light pink, again, is kind of like the highest priced listings in the market. So I'll just hide that. Now, my listing on average, you'll notice, is right now sometimes below that 50th percentile, but most of the time it's in that 50th to 75th percentile, sometimes even above that. So this listing, if this is like an average listing in my market, it might be a little bit overpriced. So if I have an average listing, sometimes I want to see my prices be a little bit higher than the market, sometimes a little bit lower than the market. Of course, looking far out, this might be okay because we're looking at my high season and it's also really far out on the calendar. So that far out factor that raises my prices for dates that are far away is currently applying. But even so, I might say, for some of these low demand midweek dates, I might actually want to be a little bit more competitive. So I'm going to drop my base price by, say, 400 feet, just about 10%. We'll drop it down to like 360. So I would keep your base price adjustments between like 5 and 10%. You don't want to drop too drastically. Again, incremental adjustments, see how it changes. But you'll be able to see here, now you'll notice if I hide this market 75th to 90th percentile, I'm rarely going above that 75th percentile just by that simple little base price change. It's making me much more competitive. My prices are not, too high. So when you're going through that base price exercise, as a final step, hop in here and see how your prices compare to your competitors. Again, sometimes during high demand, it's okay to be in that dark pink. And sometimes during low demand, it's okay to be in the gray or even below the gray. Now, another thing that you can get out of this graph is understanding where your minimum price might want to be. You might want to set it. Here, I'll choose next 1 year. And you will see I'm actually able to zoom out a little bit and look at the pricing in the market, not just for the next 6 months, but even further than that. So what I'm looking for is the bottom of the lowest part of that gray mass. So right now, that's probably this season right here. Now, of course, we're not pricing like at the lowest pricing we can because it is still a good, 7 months out or so. But I can see that the market's 25th percentile, so kind of where the gray meets the white. Here, that's 221. I can kind of hover it, and it's like in the 220s during this time of year. So during this time of year, I want PriceLabs to be able to drop my prices as low as the market goes, maybe if not a little bit lower. So in this case, if my owner is okay with it and I can handle it, I think like 200 would potentially be a good base price for this list, or sorry, minimum price for this listing. Because, and you'll notice when it loads that changing this minimum price doesn't affect anything. My prices in the next couple of weeks, as long as they weren't already hitting my minimum price, nothing's going to automatically like drop to 200 because of this. It's just going to give us that ability that if we need to drop to 200, we can. A couple of you have asked, at least asked before. Oh, looks like we're right at 4, so I'm so sorry for going over. I'm happy to stay on for a couple more minutes if any of you have the time. I really do appreciate all the time that you have given us today. I know this webinar is a little bit longer than intended. I will definitely work on tightening it up in future rounds. But thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to stay on, so if you have a little bit of time, you're more than welcome to join us. But if you have to go, thank you so much. We'll be sending out a recording, so you'll be able to see the end of it, when you have a chance. Cool. So a couple of you asked, okay, well, I don't want to see all of these other people. I have a really high-end luxury home, and this is just, these are just average operators in my area. Now, that totally makes sense, right? You have a premium product and it's important, yeah, your prices are high compared to the average market, but let's take a look at the ones that are very, specifically your competitors. Now, you do have the option to make a comp set and market dashboards. It's a little bit of a lengthy process. Not everybody needs to do it, especially if you're just getting started. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll notice this competitor map. Now, this map is really great. It actually shows you a very similar view to what we were looking at in the base price help tool. Again, you can click on any of these listings and actually see them, like this one here. Jumbo's Hideout, what a cute name. Very nice house, great deck furniture. No pool or anything, but maybe it's comparable to mine. So what you can do is you can add up to 10 competitors to this competitor calendar. So I'm going to say Jumbo's Hideout, and you can add a bunch of these and then click update data. And then you'll actually see your prices compared to those specific calendar or those specific competitors that are your competition. You can look at a table or you can look at a graph. What's nice about the table is you'll notice it looks like they might have some locked dates. Let's try to find another one here. We'll just use like this one. You should be able to see, yes, this is a great example. So this Heaven of Rest, see how there's sort of like these grayed out dates? These are dates that have actually been booked or blocked. So you can actually get a feel for your competitor's occupancy too. This is nice because maybe somebody's listed at, $10,000 a night and you know that they're not actually getting booked, right? It looks like this person or this home is, uses some sort of dynamic pricing, just based on the fact that their prices are varying a little bit. And you can see that they are actually getting booked compared to this other one that, isn't varying their prices as they vary a little bit. But this Jumbo's Hideout, they don't have anything on the books currently. I can also look at this in a graph. So if I like this view and I can kind of I like to see how my prices change compared to my competition. Like in this case, if I've chosen these two competitors, look at how much higher my prices. So my prices are the black line. My competitors are sort of this blue line. I might not be super competitive against these two. And if these are the two that are most similar to me and the ones that I want to be competitive with, if I'm not getting bookings and they are, you might be able to kind of see that right here. Beautiful. I know that we have a ton of questions. I kind of want to cruise through this. We went through the occupancy graph. We went through the compare competitor calendar. Probably can talk about this. I don't want to go too much over because I know you all probably have better things to do than to hang out with me, even though I love that many of you are still on here. Let's go through some of the questions that we've accumulated in the time that I've been chatting. Okay. Just looking at a couple of these. I will stay on to see if you can answer my question, Michael. Okay, let me see if I can find your question. Okay, yes, I was actually waiting, Michael, for us to talk about market data before I addressed your question. So Michael's question was, my pricing objective is to stay around the 90th percentile of the market. I'm seeing June and July, due to seasonality demand, that my prices are above 90% for that month. I have far out pricing turned off. We are the price quote leader. Should I be concerned about that? So I'm assuming he's saying, I could be wrong, Michael, but the price leader, meaning that you are the highest priced in the market. Again, I would go back, take a second and read that article that I sent about pricing against your competition. While sometimes it's a good idea to have those goals to say, hey, I want to be priced in the 90th percentile, especially if you're in a seasonal market, you might not want to be. Because yes, we definitely want to maximize your revenue during that high demand time. But when we don't have high demand, like in this market, for example, we're seeing much uh, we're seeing much lower demand this year compared to years past. That 90th percentile strategy might not work in the future. And then you're going to have to come in here and make adjustments and sort of be constantly having to update your prices. Now, if you're able to get booked at the 90th percentile, you know, by all means do that. But just keep in mind, if you're seeing your occupancy suffer, whether that's because you're above the 90th percentile in your high demand months, or because you're just priced too high during your shoulder season or your low demand months, I would maybe reconsider that strategy or just maybe adjust it a little bit, keeping in mind the shifts in your market. Because you might have a really premium product. I used to manage these beautiful homes that rented for like 30K a week, and they kind of sometimes do, you know, perform at just a different level than the market in general. But you still do want to kind of keep in mind, one, how is your market doing over year? Is, my market pacing behind? And two, am I actually, am I performing with this strategy the way that I want to be? So hopefully that helps. Uh, if you want to discuss further, feel free to reach out to us or join us next week when we run this webinar. Um, there are a ton of questions. Pallav, are you still with me? I know it's pretty late where you are.
Yeah, yeah.
What are
I'm
you
around.
thinking? Do you think we should wrap this up? I know we're almost 10 minutes past. I'm happy to stay on for another couple of minutes, but I don't know that I'll be able to answer everybody's questions. We can try to reach out to you individually. Those of you who put your questions in the Q&A, we can try to answer some of them just via our support tickets. Um,
Yeah,
but
let because I
yeah,
suppose only some like a bunch of people have left, I suppose. So
yeah. Before we go, I'm still going to answer a couple more questions, but while I still have some of you here, trying to find the poll. Oh, I need to end that one. Um, Let me do another poll just to see how helpful this was. Hopefully, I mean, I won't be offended if if you didn't learn anything, but hopefully we were able to move that needle from when we first did this poll at the beginning. If you have any feedback or have any other questions, you can always reach out to us at support@pricelabs.co. I will just keep rambling for a couple more minutes because I know that there are some really good questions here and I don't want to leave you all hanging. Um, no question here. Awesome. Awesome. Yep. Well, we will be sending this out, so y'all can definitely rewatch this if needed. Okay, Tony, a lot of my competition does not use dynamic pricing, and my prices are higher because of that. Would I still want to change my pricing to get closer to where they are, or go with the data that you use to determine my prices? So Tony, that's a really good question. We kind of get this question on both sides. Like everybody in my market is using dynamic pricing. Should I also use dynamic pricing? But then also what you're saying, which it's kind of like flat pricing in my area. Now, as long as you're not in a really sad market where we're raising your prices is going to make it so other people get booked and there's just like not enough demand to go around. Even then we should be able to see that and get your prices a little bit lower. You probably would want to maybe like reevaluate your base price if that's the case, if you're just not seeing bookings. But ideally, even if other people are booked in or are not using dynamic pricing in your market, hopefully what we can do is get you booked at the best price, right? In your high season, in those high demand dates. Uh, you have a unique property, I would assume, unless you're in like a condo area, but you probably have a very unique property and people will want to stay at your home. You have inventory that none of your other competitors have. So even though they have flat pricing, your home might be the one that people want to stay at, and they're going to have to pay a little bit more if it is a high demand date. Now, you do want to pay attention again to how you are positioning yourself compared to your competition marketing wise with photos and with amenities and things like that. But by all means, you should definitely still be using dynamic pricing, even if the other competitors in your market are not. It just means that you're going to be making a bunch more money than they are, right? Actually pricing correctly a little bit higher on those high demand dates, but then maybe even pricing, more competitively with them during low demand dates and hopefully getting yourself more occupancy than they might. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, good question, Santiago. Santiago saying that he's been using PriceLabs for a couple of months now, but he's seeing that dates that are booked are actually changing on the calendar. Now, PriceLabs will actually update your rates for booked dates continuously. That way, if you have a block that gets removed or somebody canceled, you don't have like an old rate that shows up, you have a new rate. If you want to change that, you can reach out to support@pricelabs.co and we'll change the settings so that your prices for book dates don't change. It's very much up to you. Okay, I just noticed the event holiday markers on the future prices calendar. That's something that we actually just released recently. They're just showing holidays for me. Is there a way for me to see if it's tracking Major League Baseball games and local college graduations, etc.? Yes, 100%. So you won't, I'm not sure why it's not showing on my calendar. Oh, because it's on this one here. So you'll notice that what Rafi is talking about are sort of these pink dots at the bottom here. If I hover over them, you'll see like May 25th, that's Memorial Day. Looks like we've got June 19th or Juneteenth is also on here. Now, if we don't know what the event is, sometimes we won't name it. So if you go back to your calendar, you'll see this events and holiday section, and you can view all of the dates that we're actually detecting as high demand or potential events. And you'll notice this May 17th and 18th, we see that there's something going on there, but we just don't know what it is. If you happen to know what it is, feel free to shoot us a message. This actually goes directly to our data science team. You can tell us what the name of the event is, and you can give us any feedback here. So say you know that there's a really big baseball game that's coming in and your prices are maybe a little bit lower than you'd like, you can type us a little note, send it to our data science team, and it will improve our pricing for the future. We do look at every single piece of feedback that comes in. So again, that human knowledge that everybody has here is also influencing the greater good at PriceLabs. Okay, and I know there's a couple of more questions. There's still a bunch of you on here. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know it's way past time. There were a couple of you that asked about how to charge for different prices for different lengths of stay. That's considered length of stay pricing. Not every PMS that we connect to supports it, but if you are interested, again, you can come to our handy little search and say length. Yep, so length, I don't know how to spell length, otherwise it would pop up. Length of stay pricing adjustments right here. You can see if your connected account does support it, and if it doesn't, you can see some other ones that do. Many of you might actually notice that you could do this within your connected account, just outside of PriceLabs. But I think that's honestly all that we have time for. We're 15 minutes over. I am so impressed by how many of you stayed on. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, we're running this session again next week. So if you want to join us again, and hopefully I won't go over that time, I'll definitely make sure that one of our team members is here answering more of the Q&As that come in as they pop up. Also, if you had a Q&A that wasn't answered, that you entered in the Q&A section, we'll do our best to reach out to you in the next couple of days. Thank you all so, so much. I hope you have a lovely rest of your Wednesday. And again, appreciate your time. Have a good one, y'all.